All right, welcome back. This is your host, Tom, or Robots, and this is my look at episode 4 of the second season of The Rings of Power. I'm glad that you are here, and welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. All right, so let's get into it. I've realized something recently as I've been discussing, let's not say debating, discussing these episodes both on the Discord and online on social media. I've been on Threads, as you guys have probably heard the little announcement. Come join me over there, by the way. It's very nice. It's a lot better than Twitter. But I think I've realized something. One of the things that I have been doing, and I'm going to preface this before we get into the details of the episode, and just so you know, I'm going to go through my reactions and thoughts and predictions, and that's a big important part about this. But one of the things I've realized is that I think fundamentally I engage with this series, and maybe just watching things and experiencing things in general, in a slightly different way than a lot of people online do. And maybe you can identify with me on this, and maybe you can't. But here's what I'm saying. One of the things that a lot of people do that I've noticed, and the disconnect in the way that people do or don't enjoy this show, is that they react to things in a way, and you're probably going to say, well, no duh. Obviously, this is like, because it's the 90s, no duh. But this is going somewhere. They react in a way where they respond to what they're seeing with a should response. Well, this is what the show should do or should have done. And my initial response is instead a debate about where the show is going to go and a seeking to understand why they chose the perspective and the decisions and made those decisions the way they did. And I think that that is the first big distinction and the thing I've realized about the way I engage with this and the way other people engage with this. And I think that's because of most likely my philosophy training, because I have a degree in philosophy. And if you've taken any philosophy classes, one of the things you may have realized in doing that, especially if you've gone through a bunch of them, is that if you engage with the topic, or more likely the philosopher, as you go through these classes, typically you'll jump from one philosopher to the next, and then you'll study what they thought and why they thought the things that they thought. And if you engage with that with a should perspective, as I watched a lot of people in my classes try to do, you always end up disappointed. Well, why would they believe that? Because clearly they should see that the world works like this. If you're constantly engaging with things in an abrasive, contentious sort of way, then you never actually move from your current position, and you never really learn and you never really grow. You also never really gain an understanding of the philosopher that you're studying, or the person that you're talking to, or the writer or the author of the book that you're reading, or of the show that you're watching. In order to truly understand their perspective, you have to come at it from a different mindset. You can't look at what they're doing and say, well, I'm just going to should you around and look for all the holes and all the problems that I see. And in fact, this is something that actually I was having a conversation with my 14-year-old son, because he just recently got to debate things like should American citizens have the right to have guns and things like that in school. He's in high school now, and they're having these debates, and it's interesting to see him work through these positions. And in the class, they talk about the Socratic method and all of that. The Socratic method has to do with asking questions to get to the core and truly to understand what the person you're talking to is actually saying, what they actually believe and why they believe those things. And this works for a few reasons, and believe me, I'm getting somewhere with this. The reason this works is you can't truly argue against a point until you understand the point. You can't truly argue against someone's reasoning until you've determined what their reasoning actually is. And on top of that, you can't determine shoulds or should nots unless you have their perspective. It's just like if you're debating somebody. If you don't actually understand their side of the debate better than they do, then you're not going to even be arguing the same point the same way. There's no way that you can actually counter their points unless you truly understand their points. So I hope that makes sense. My point here is that you have to understand the thing first in its own context, in its own reasoning, before you can state what it should or shouldn't be doing. And it's also more fun that way. if you look at every single conversation, every single thing that you come across, every show that you watch, and you go, oh, well, I'm going to plant my flag and say, well, I don't need to know more about your perspective on this. I don't need to understand your reasoning for why you made these choices. I'm just going to tell you what you should have done instead in order to make this more enjoyable. Well, that's fine, but you're not really engaging with the content or the writer or any of that. So all that's to say that my engagement with this, I've noticed, comes from a different perspective. And that is kind of the friction that I feel when discussing these things online with other people. So from that perspective, go with me now to take a look at episode 4 and what we're going to do. And maybe this helps clarify what I do with this show is I'm going to try to understand the reason for the choices and see it in the context of the writers and what they're doing. And this is no different than what I've been doing before, but at least it kind of frames it a little bit more obviously. And I'm more aware that I'm doing this now. And there are things in this show, clearly, Orc Baby is one of them, but also things like Tom Bombadil that people will debate about. Oh, they should have done it like this. They should have done it like this. I'm not so interested in, hey, I'm just going to plant my flag and say they should have done this, as I am to say, okay, why did you make those choices? And why does that still work or not work based on what it appears to be your reasoning for doing so? So with that all said, let's get into it. So one of the things that this episode does is it takes us on this journey with the elves. You have Galadriel and now Elrond. Elrond is now the leader of the group. This group is heading off to Eregion, however you want to pronounce it, in order to check in with Celebrimbor and see how he's doing, because it seems like they're not getting any messages back and forth. So they got to figure out what's going on here. And there's conflict still. And one of the big conflicts is Galadriel and Elrond and their different perspectives about this ring. And that goes on this entire episode. We know that Elrond is skeptical about the ring, and that is true to his character as shown in The Lord of the Rings as well. It's also true to the lore, and the fact that he even says things like, oh, well, according to the lore, you need to use these weapons to kill these Barrow Wights is funny to me, because it's funny in a like, hey, no, that's actually accurate sort of way. Yes, Elrond can be an awesome warrior, but more so, he was a scholar. He was somebody who was very learned. He's somebody who spent a lot of time reading. And maybe part of that is because he came from a long line of really important people who did things before he existed. He's one of the younger elves. So he needs to engage with the world in a more hands-on kind of informing himself sort of way, because he didn't necessarily live through all the events that everyone else lived through. And I know there's some friction about like, well, you know, he treats Galadriel like she's his cousin or something like that, and really she's going to eventually be his mother-in-law, you know, like, and she's way older than he is, even though they don't look different ages. All of that, of course, is complexity to it. But the other thing I want to address here is Galadriel in the way that she responds. And this is a critique that has been around since the first season. The idea that she is acting like a flippant teenager, that she is just wants to do what she wants to do and nobody understands her, and so she's going to do her thing anyway, that sort of thing. And I think that actually a more accurate perspective on her is that she's acting like an old person who's stuck in their ways. I think that's actually the more accurate perspective. It's not so much that, oh, no one understands me and screw you guys, I'm going to do what I want to do. It's more of, hey, I have a lot of experience here. I have a lot of life experience. I have a lot of eggs in this basket, and I've made vows that I'm going to follow through with. And on top of it, you all maybe don't remember the events of the First Age the way I do. Maybe you don't remember engaging with Sauron the way I do. And I have a perspective on this that nobody else understands. And so I'm going to stick with what I believe to be is right. In the same way that your grandparents might say, well, this younger generation they don't have the experience that I have. They don't understand what is actually going on here. And when they get old enough, eventually they'll see my perspective. But this is where I'm going to go with this. This is how I'm going to feel, how I'm going to behave, whatever. These are my decisions based on what I believe. And I see that actually being more accurate. It's just that she's young looking, so we go, well, she's like a teenager, and it's no, she's like somebody who's set in her ways, that is having to learn to be a little bit different than the way she was originally. And in this episode, you have the elves, and they're going off on this adventure. You have the debate about the ring. There is reason to still be skeptical of these rings, even if Sauron didn't actually engage with them at all. They are still liable to be used against the elves, especially once the One Ring is made. Even though the One Ring has like full control over those other rings and can, turn humans into liches and all of that sort of thing, it still can tap into the elven rings. In fact, when the One Ring was made and put on Sauron's finger, the elves in the lore, in the stories, felt it immediately and took their rings off, because they could get the sense that Sauron was somehow able to engage with them or try to manipulate them or perceive what they were doing or something like that, right? So they decided that they couldn't use the rings anymore. And so there's good reason for both perspectives. Elrond's perspective is, hey, it's dangerous. There might be things about this that we don't understand yet. And he's right. Galadriel's perspective is, yes, but they're tools, and they're very valuable tools, and we should use them because there is good in them. And she's right as well. They're both correct. It's a good tool to use, but you need to be careful with it. And they get to the scene with and please make sure you watch this episode before you listen to this, but I should have said at the beginning. They get to the scene with the Barrow Wights, and some people have complained. They're like, well, that breaks the lore because the Barrow Wights didn't exist until the Third Age. They are squishing down everything. And this is another one of those things. I'm not going to say they shouldn't have done this because I have no control over what they're doing. What I will say is, why would they do this, right? Why have they put all these people and all these characters and all these instances and situations all into this one show when really they span a few thousand years from the fall of Numenor, or even before the fall of Numenor, all the way through to some of the things that they're pulling in from the beginning of the Third Age, like Barrow Wights and maybe the existence of Gandalf and all of that. And it's because it just makes for a more concise story. It makes for something that we all can engage with in ways that we recognize. And it's kind of, think of it like this. It's kind of like a theme park ride version of a thing, right? Like, you don't go to the theme park ride expecting to get the entire movie. You go to the theme park ride and expecting to get a quick little, oh yeah, there's that thing, and then there's this thing, or like you go on one of those superhero rides and you're like, oh, that's that scene from that movie, or that's that ability or that's the super suit that they wear, and it's just kind of pulling in all the tasty bits from the lore and condensing it down into a story that we could enjoy. And that seems to be what they're doing. And sure, that would be really cool to have a story that is much more spread out over long periods of time. But again, I don't know that works in the same kind of way, or would even be that enjoyable to a common audience. So to take something and kind of move it out of place a little bit makes sense. Also, you could make a lore justification. In the lore, the Barrow Wights are there because they were cursed by the Witch King, but the Witch King doesn't exist yet. So you could say that maybe these Barrow Wights were cursed by Sauron. And the fact that they are the burial locations of the men of the First Age who lived in that area still tracks. That's still accurate. So to make a jump from, well, Sauron could have cursed these people with dark magics, and then maybe there were other Barrows that were cursed later by the Witch King. You can make that justification, but you don't even have to go that far. You can just say, well, how they were corrupted is a slightly different and it happened at an earlier time, but they're still there. So you get this cool scene where they get to fight a bunch of ghosty bad guys, skellies. And I love the animations, the way that they kind of pulled their bodies back together and they looked kind of puppeted and all of that. Super creepy and wonderful. And I loved that scene. And then we get to the end of this story with the elves. But we're going to take each group in turn. And they they come across these orcs, and then Galadriel's basically like, oh, the one elf gets shot in the stomach, and they all like hunker down, and the one guy's like, hey guys, ow, and then the ring heals him. I'm not sure the ring has that ability, but the idea that it keeps elves from fading makes it kind of tangentially accurate to say maybe it does, which is fine. Again, they're kind of just pushing that boundary a little bit. I'm not gonna again should them into, well, they should or shouldn't have done that. They made that decision. And so I'm going to go, okay, well, where does that go? Where does that lead to? And I think that it is a Chekhov's gun kind of thing. They're using the ring to heal something now so that that ability won't come out of nowhere when it's more important later, or when it fails later and they're expecting it to work and all of a sudden it doesn't, because maybe the one ring was forged or something like that. This is a setup for something, and it's going to be important later. That's one of the things I've noticed about this writing, is that they are very, very aware of why they're putting certain scenes in, why they're dropping certain words, certain characters are having certain interactions, and it's because they've mapped out these character arcs and the event arcs very, very carefully. There's a lot of that pattern going on. But let's talk about the conflict with the orcs. Galadriel's like, here, take the ring, go. Elrond's like, she's not saving us, she's saving the ring, which is probably true. But then you get this other moment where she gets to fight the orcs, and you get this other badass combat situation. And the truth is that she fought like an Amazonian. Like, those descriptions are in the lore. We know that she can do these kinds of things. And in the First Age, in the conflicts between the elves and the orcs, it took numerous orcs to be able to counter one of the elves, because they were that talented and crazy with their combat abilities and their power and all of that. So that all tracks. She's kicking orc butt, totally tracks. And then the whole Adar situation at the end, which is wonderful because now the tables are turned. Previously, she was the one who had him at the end of her sword, and now it's going to go the other way. So we're going to see where that goes. And as for predictions with that, I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about this too much, strangely enough. Let me let that ruminate while we move on to some other things. Let's talk about the Harfeet and Gandalf. I'm just going to call him Gandalf. This is another thing people have been debating. They're like, oh, maybe he's one of the Blue Wizards. Oh, maybe he's Saruman. Oh, maybe he's the Witch King. No, friends, he's Gandalf. There's 99.999% chance. They've given us so many hints at this point. The Stoor woman who says, oh, is he some grand elf? Grand elf? Gandalf? They're basically signposting every turn along this path. And there's other scenes that we've had from the first season where he actually says things like follow your nose. Gandalf kind of quotes. A lot of that stuff happens. And on top of it, they are setting up, and this is another one of those patterns with the show. This is why I'm making these predictions, is because I'm seeing patterns. They are setting up a pattern for us to understand the character in a certain light, to then better understand that character later on when we see them later. So I talked about Isildur and how they're going to make him into a very valiant, honorable, interesting, good guy kind of character, so that the corruption of the ring later on feels more tragic. With Gandalf, what we're getting is an understanding of who he is, who his foundation was when he arrived in Middle-earth. And that foundation is built around a few things: trusting the small folk, understanding that halflings are much more capable than people give them credit for. That's what he's learning hanging out with the Harfeets. Also, a certain respect and admiration for people like Tom Bombadil, or just understanding the importance of your role and your calling in the world. Tom Bombadil, in this episode, let's talk about him. I think that he's very, very well done, and for the right reasons. He could be a little more jolly. I would have been okay with that, but I understand why they keep that back in order for it not to be tonally abrasive to the audience. But what they're doing here with this Tom Bombadil, I think, is they're coming at it from the perspective of, this is a character, if it is not Eru Iluvatar on the planet in Middle-earth himself, it is a character who is reminiscent of a being who is there, who is earlier. I mean, it even states that, like, I was here at the beginning, who is older than everything else, that actually does care for existence, that has a relationship with and kind of over some of the things. You know, he can talk to the trees, all of that stuff tracks. The fact that he is, he's a little kind of forgetful, and even there's a quote from Elrond where Elrond talks about how you don't give him responsibilities because he's not going to follow through, that sort of thing. I don't remember the exact quote, but that's because the things of this world, the lures, let's say it this way, the temptations of this world, for the ring, for example, because he's able to hold the ring in the Fellowship of the Rings in the books, and he has no will to keep it. It also has no control over him. It's like the two things are just neutral. And I believe that he also still has the same perspective on things like social customs and things like that. The way that other people would, they would respect responsibility and those kinds of things. He's not that kind of person. Those are not the things he cares about. They have no effect over him. But that doesn't mean that there are no things that he cares about. In fact, if we look at the way he shows up in the Fellowship of the Ring, he shows up to the hobbits right at the time where they needed him most, right at the time where they were the most off the path that they were planning to go through at that point in the story. They were in the Old Forest, they get attacked by a tree, and then he comes along and he frees them. And he gives them, at a moment where they are most discouraged and tired and exhausted, a place to rest, a place to feel better, and confidence that they're doing the right thing and they're headed in the right direction. And that's exactly what he's giving to the stranger in this situation. It's the same thing. He is there as kind of a guidepost. He's not there as an instructor or a teacher so much as he's the guy who's there to say, this is what your fate is. Keep going forward. And that is a very Tolkien thing. Characters have fates. They have their dooms, as we've discussed before. And he's there to remind people, this is your fate. This is where you're supposed to go. And he even answers the stranger's questions when it comes to that. Now let's talk about the Stoors. I think the Stoors are wonderful. This idea that, there were hobbits in this part of the world. Everything's starting to come together with some of the ways that they've set things up in the previous season. The idea that they live in holes here, and so it was part of who they are, but to the Harfeet that's odd because they don't have steady homes, and that they're looking for this place that is basically the Shire, and they just haven't found it yet. It's all very quaint, and it totally works for me. I think it's actually really cool. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable. And I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ringslore. Oh, and before I forget, we need to go back to this situation where Tom Bombadil tells the stranger, basically, it's your job, it's your fate to confront this dark wizard and also Sauron. And some people are using that to justify the dark wizard as being Saruman, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, yes, Gandalf does confront Saruman in the Lord of the Rings, but that's centuries, millennia from now. Also, Saruman was a good guy for most of his time in Middle-earth and before that. He was one of the best of the wise. He was the most capable, and he spent a lot of time studying and working towards his goal. The problem with Saruman is that eventually his study and then corruption from Sauron through the Palantir was too much, and he lost hope and turned evil. But that didn't happen until the end of the Third Age. So a Saruman here at the end of the Second Age, 3,000 something years before those events, who's already turned evil and will be confronted by Gandalf, only to have to be confronted by him again later, but yet somehow regains his trust in the middle, doesn't make any sense. That is not the shortest distance between 2 points. The shortest distance between 2 points here is that this is a blue wizard. And I mentioned on the previous episode, everybody around who works for this wizard has blue on their outfit somewhere. And on top of this, we have 2 conflicting versions of what Tolkien was considering was going on with the Blue Wizards. One, where they went off into the east and they did whatever they were supposed to do, and they just weren't heard from again. And another, where they fell to corruption and they ended up doing terrible things and being bad guys. And there's, of course, more nuance in both of those perspectives. But that shows us that it is possible for this to be a Blue Wizard, one that was corrupted. And who knows, the other blue wizard might be out there somewhere and they're kind of hiding that in their pocket or something. So I guess the other perspective that people have been debating on this is the stranger is the other blue wizard, which still just doesn't, I get the argument there. Okay, one of the blue wizards was corrupted. The other one was sent to deal with the corruption and fight back against them, kind of like Gandalf standing up against Saruman. I get it. That works better. But all the hints that they've been giving us are that this is Gandalf. So maybe we'll get to the end of the season and you can say, I told you so. And that's fine. I'll eat crow or whatever. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be Gandalf. And if they don't follow through with it being Gandalf at this point, then the audience is going to feel very teased about that. And a lot of the other things that they've done, like the previous reveal from the previous season about who Halbrand actually was, turned out to be the person that seemed most likely. So I think that they're still going to go in that direction. All right, so let's talk about, there's still some stuff we haven't gotten to. We've got the Arondir and Isildur and these poor people, the Númenóreans and the other people in the south that are dealing with the wild people. So a few things here. Isildur, dude, red flags, dude. Like, stop trying to get with this girl. Lots of red flags. But it seems that we're getting a version of him as a young man who's easily swayed by a pretty face and feels like a very real thing. It also shows that his good intentions can be used against him, and that makes sense as well. Now we get this dramatic scene as they are following this trail through the forest that the orcs are carving. I think you may have noticed the wide shots with all the trees destroyed. That was intentional. And then the scene with the bug creature in the mud and the fact that they almost drowned in the mud and they come back up. Again, a little comedic. These kinds of scenes happen. They're a little goofy. It does show something interesting about the woman's, I forget her name, her character, and the fact that she came back to try to save them. Shows that there is potentially redemption there. There might be a redemption arc for her. Also, Arondir is just a badass, and I love that stuff. I mean, keep doing awesome elf bow stuff because everybody loves it, because Legolas and whatever. So thank you, show, for that stuff. But let's talk about where this is actually going with this. We have the situation where they eventually do kind of track down where they're going. It's night, and then the Ents show up, and there's an Entwife. And sure, this is some fan service, but I think it's great because we finally have Ents and Entwives, and we know eventually the Entwives leave and then are lost, and it's all very tragic. And so that lends a certain poignancy to this moment, and the fact that she's so very upset. And then on top of it, Arondir, it does the most elven thing ever. He puts his hand on her arm part, let's just call it an arm, and basically apologizes and says like, if I knew that this hurt you so much, I never would have done it, like by cutting down trees or any ill intent towards trees. And we will be here to protect the forest. And basically connects with her on this, like, hey, I love nature too. I'm a friend. Don't worry. And there are echoes of, I'm sure, centuries or millennia of elves and Ents and being in the wild together. And the fact that he's a Sylvan elf, it totally fits with that as well. So good. And you can't forget that Isildur is experiencing this, probably for the first time. And that's going to play into his decision to plant the seeds of the tree in Numenor, which we talked about. Go back to those Numenorian episodes where Isildur is the one, he actually steals the seeds. But this is going to play into it. He will see this elven perspective on the importance of nature and trees on specifically. And that's going to play into some things. And I don't know how they're going to play with that in the rest of the show, but I know that's coming. And there's a reason Isildur was there for this moment. That is foreshadowing as well. And then we have Theo. Theo's saved. He's up in that tree capture place, whatever that is. And some of these other people are saved. And of course, the woman is reunited with her betrothed, I guess, however that works. And she's like confused to see him, and they almost kissed, and a little bit weird, but that's fine. But the Theo situation, I'm still getting weird vibes from Theo. I don't know if it's intentional and I don't want to say anyone's a bad actor. That's not what I'm going to say, but maybe his performance is, I don't know if that's intentional through his performance choices or not, or maybe I'm just misreading it in a way. But there is a big theme of loyalty here, and people have speculated that Theo might be the Witch King. What if they're actually setting up Theo to be the king of the mountain men, the men of Dunharrow, who turn their back on Isildur when he needs them, and then they get cursed, and of course Aragorn goes and brings them back to fight in the Battle of Pelennor Fields and all of that. What if that's what's happening here, is that he's supposed to be somebody who is faithful and yet turns away? I don't see the full path to making that work yet. Somehow he would have to become a king of men and a leader of a group, which he might do in these dire situations by being brave and then people deciding to follow him. That sort of thing can happen. So maybe there's something there. I'm not really sure, because they need to set up individuals that will eventually become wraiths. And there's only so many people that we've been introduced to. And we know that only so many of them, probably about 4, are Numenorian. So there's like 5 others that have to come from other places. So who are those people, right? So it still seems like he could be either of those things, and we still haven't seen his ears. So also, the more I look at his face, the more he and Arondir seem to have similar features in like their chins and their noses. And so maybe he was cast because he is Arondir's child, but I don't know. I can't foresee the reason for why you would want to do that unless there was like a really important character arc there. But in every situation that we have the child of elves and men, it's been for a very good reason, and that person has stepped up to do some incredible things. And I'm not sure who that makes Theo in this situation. Also, it seems pretty obvious to me at this point that Estrid, that's her name, Estrid, the wild woman, is a fill-in character for Bronwyn. Bronwyn, the actress, decided not to come back for the second season, and so I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, that they wrote in the story about her not surviving her wounds in order to kill her character off. Notice that they cover her up. We don't actually see the actress. But they already had set up a situation where Arondir, Isildur, Bronwyn, and Theo would end up in the situations that we've seen so far in the first half of the season. And Bronwyn was probably going to end up as a sort of potential love triangle with Isildur. And so that can't happen with the actress not being there. And they didn't just recast the part. Instead, they are swapping her out with Estrid. And that leads me to believe, and again, this is all speculation, but it seems like that's probably the case here. And so now they're kind of going in this different direction. But that's just speculation. I just had this feeling watching it. I was like, wait a minute, this was supposed to be the other character that we already met, but now Estrid is filling that gap, and so they kind of wrote it in as a thing. At least that's my perspective on it. I could be totally wrong about this, but there you go. That is everything that I have to say about season 2's episode 4 so far. I hope you're enjoying these. In fact, I'm enjoying doing these so much. I think I was saying I was going to get back to The Hobbit this week, but I don't want to have to wait to talk about episode 5 when we get it in just, I'm doing this on a Tuesday, when we get that on a Thursday, and I'd like to put that up on Monday for everybody. So I think I'm going to just do another one of these and also have a mid-break and call people out because it's been 2 weeks since I've done that. So thank you for being here. And just a reminder, if you are interested in supporting the show, there's Patreon, patreon.com/LOTR Lorecast. There's lots of other episodes. If you're only tuning in for these recap episodes and you want to learn more about all the different stuff going on in the Silmarillion and other stuff, go back, check out all those other episodes. And then also thank you for your support and any 5-star reviews or ratings and things. I'll read those out on future episodes on Apple Podcasts. And of course, you can rate it on Spotify and other places as well. Or you can share the show with your friends. All of that is super helpful. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you very soon.